The envelope was still in my jacket pocket when I pulled into my daughter's driveway that Saturday afternoon. And if I had walked through that front door 2 minutes earlier, I would have handed my entire life to the two people who were already planning how to take it. Inside that envelope was a letter from a law firm in Bar Harbor, Maine. My older brother, Whit, had died 3 weeks before, and in the quiet final chapter of his life, he had left me something I never saw coming: a working lobster wharf on the Maine coast, a 7-bedroom summer compound on Mount Desert Island, municipal bonds, Berkshire shares, and a total estate worth just over $4.1 million. I was 63 years old, a retired structural engineer from West Hartford, a widower, a man who still drove a 2014 Camry with a coffee stain on the passenger seat because my wife, Marjorie, always teased me about being too stubborn to replace anything that still worked. I had not told a soul about the inheritance. Not a neighbor. Not the woman at the post office who waved to me every Tuesday. Not a single person. The first person I wanted to tell was my daughter, Holly. I want you to hold that thought for a moment, because everything that follows begins with that simple decision: driving to my daughter's house with good news and an open heart. And what I found waiting for me on the other side of that cracked kitchen window is the reason I am sitting on a porch in Maine right now, instead of signing papers in a room I never chose to be in. Subscribe to Eamon's revenge stories right now, because this is the kind of story where the revenge is slow, the patience is everything, and the ending hits harder than any explosion ever could. Holly was 34. She was married to Brock Tessero and the mother of my 3-year-old grandson, Wesson. They lived in a beautiful colonial in Greenwich that Brock liked to say was worth $1.8 million, though I had done enough structural work on enough houses to know that a number like that usually means someone is buried under a mortgage they can barely breathe under. I parked behind Brock's black Range Rover, got out, looked at Wesson's little plastic tricycle tipped over on the lawn. I picked it up without thinking, and that was when I heard voices from the cracked kitchen window just above my head. Brock first. He's not going to give us anything voluntarily. Then Holly. My Holly. We don't need him to give us anything voluntarily. We just need him to move in with us, get him out of that house, sell it, put him in the in-law suite, then we get power of attorney by Christmas. I stood there on the lawn, holding my grandson's tricycle with $4.1 million pressed against my chest. I could not move. Brock asked what would happen if I refused. Holly's answer came soft and unhurried, like a woman who had already run through the problem from every angle. He won't refuse. He's lonely. I just bring up Mom and he falls apart. That was the sentence. Not the house. Not the power of attorney by Christmas. Not the cold math of taking a grieving man's money while he was still breathing. It was hearing my daughter talk about her dead mother like a button she could press whenever she needed me to stop thinking, clearly. Marjorie had been gone 4 years. Breast cancer. Slow and cruel, the way that disease tends to be. Holly had sat beside her bed. She had cried at the funeral. She had held my hand when the casket went into the ground. And now she was using that exact grief as a strategy. I stood there on the path outside her beautiful Greenwich house, staring at Wesson's little tricycle, and felt something inside me go very quiet. Not broken, not furious, just quiet. The way a room goes silent the moment the power cuts out. I wanted to turn around, drive home, lock the door, and never speak to either of them again. But then I heard my brother Whit's voice in my head. He used to say it when we were young and the world was confusing and people let us down. Let people show you who they are, then believe them, then act accordingly. So I walked back to the Camry, took the envelope out of my jacket pocket, locked it in the glove compartment, Then I walked to the front door and knocked. Holly opened it with the warm, unhurried smile of a daughter who believed she had plenty of time. "Dad, you're early." I smiled right back. "Traffic was light." She hugged me. Brock came in from the deck and shook my hand with that firm, deliberate grip of his, the kind men practice when they want you to feel like the handshake means something. They sat me at the kitchen island, gave me iced tea, and talked about Wesson's preschool, Holly's boutique, the mortgage refinance, and Brock's recent bonus. I nodded at the right moments, asked the right questions, said the right things about interest rates and square footage. Because by then I had already decided. I was not going to expose them that afternoon. I was going to let them keep talking. I drove home that evening with both hands on the steering wheel and the radio off. I missed my exit outside Meriden without noticing. Ended up at a diner off the highway. Sat in a corner booth for almost 2 hours with a slice of pie in front of me that I never touched. The waitress came by 3 times. Each time I told her I was fine. I was not fine. But by the 3rd cup of coffee, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was not going to confront Holly. I was not going to warn Brock. I was not going to let either of them know I had heard every word through that window. Because if I accused them too soon, they would cry, explain it away, reframe their planning as love, and somehow I would become the paranoid old man who misunderstood his own grieving daughter. I had seen it happen to other men. Good men. Reasonable men who reached for the obvious fight and lost everything in the process. So I gave them a gift instead. On Monday morning, I called Holly. I made my voice sound tired, softer than it usually was. I told her I had been thinking about what she had said recently, that maybe the house in West Hartford really was too big for one person. Maybe the stairs were getting harder. Maybe the memories in every room were heavier than I wanted to admit. When I said Marjorie's name, I let my voice break just slightly. There was a silence on Holly's end. Then I heard her cover the phone. And faintly in the background, Brock said one word. Yes. Not like a son-in-law who was relieved his wife's father would be safe. Like a man who had just won a small but important bet. Holly came back on the line sweet as honey. "Daddy, that's wonderful. Just come stay for a while. No pressure. We'll figure it out together." I said that sounded good. Then I packed one suitcase. Not boxes, not furniture, not the photographs on the living room wall, or the books in the study or the cast iron pan I have used every Sunday morning for 30 years. One suitcase. Before I left, I asked my neighbor Lou to watch the cat. Lou looked at me for a long, quiet moment, the way old men do when they understand more than you have said. Then he said, "Whatever it is, give them hell." I smiled for the first time in 2 days. I intend to. But before I drove to Greenwich with that one suitcase, I made 2 stops that had nothing to do with moving in with my daughter. The first stop was 13 hours north, Bar Harbor, Maine, where a small white-haired lawyer named Crowder was waiting for me behind a desk covered in estate files and old coffee rings. Crowder had managed my brother Witt's affairs for 30 years. He knew the wharf. He knew the Mount Desert Island compound. He knew every bond, every share, every quiet corner of the inheritance I still barely believed was mine. When I sat down across from him, he took one look at me and said, "You drove here with more than paperwork on your mind." So I told him everything. The cracked kitchen window. The power of attorney by Christmas. The way Holly had said she could bring up my dead wife and I would fall apart. The way Brock had said yes in the background, like a man collecting on a bet. Crowder did not interrupt once. When I finished, he opened a drawer, took out a yellow legal pad, and said, "Then we make sure they never touch a dime of it." For several hours, we rebuilt my future on paper. The wharf, the summer compound, the bonds, the Berkshire shares. All of it went into an irrevocable trust. Not a simple will, not a casual beneficiary form, not something Brock could pressure Holly into waving in front of me at the kitchen table after a difficult week. A trust with real teeth. Nothing could be accessed without both my signature and Crowder's countersignature. Not through power of attorney. Not through a claim that I was becoming forgetful. Not through court filings, emotional pressure, or any holiday conversation designed to make me feel guilty for being alive and having something worth protecting. Then came the part that hurt. I had to decide who would receive it. Holly's name did not go in. Brock's name certainly did not go in. I named 3 beneficiaries. A scholarship fund at the engineering school that had given me my career. A marine research station in Maine that Whit had loved and supported quietly for 20 years. And Wesson, my grandson, in a separate trust of his own that could not be touched until he turned 35. Not a dollar of it available to either of his parents, regardless of what they told a judge, a doctor, or a family court. I signed the papers on a cold Tuesday afternoon, with rain coming down the windows of Crowder's office and the harbor barely visible through the fog. And for the first time since I had stood on that lawn with a tricycle in my hand, I could breathe. The second stop was in Stamford. Not at Holly's house, not at Brock's office. At a private investigator's office above a dental clinic, where a woman named Darren Halpine sat across from me and listened without blinking, as I explained why a 63-year-old widower needed to know what his son-in-law had actually been doing with his days. Darren asked for names, addresses, phone numbers, work history, vehicle details, social media accounts. I gave her everything I had and paid her in full before I left. 3 weeks later, the first report arrived. I was in the in-law suite at Holly's house by then, door locked, Wesson's cartoons playing softly from upstairs, Brock downstairs on what he described as a work call. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the file. By the second page, my hands had gone cold. Brock had not been working at the hedge fund for nearly a year. 11 months. Every morning he dressed carefully, kissed my daughter, climbed into the Range Rover, and drove into Manhattan like a man with somewhere important to be. He was going to a WeWork on Park Avenue, where he played online poker and made reckless trades and pretended he still had a career that anyone was paying him to show up for. Darren's report estimated he had lost approximately $612,000 over 2 years. The Range Rover was 3 payments behind. The Greenwich house had been refinanced twice and was now 4 months past due on the mortgage. The bank had already begun pre-foreclosure contact. I sat there thinking I had found the worst of it. Then I turned to the photographs. Brock had another woman, 31 years old, Stamford, worked at a yoga studio. They met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the same days he occasionally told Holly he was taking Wesson to swim lessons. There was one photograph of her at a playground, smiling at something off camera. Another of her holding my grandson's hand while he pointed at something in the distance. And then one where she had Wesson in her arms entirely, his little head against her shoulder, my grandson, in the arms of a woman whose name Holly did not know existed. I made it to the bathroom before I was sick. For 2 days after that report arrived, I could barely sit at the same breakfast table with Brock. I watched him come downstairs in his pressed shirts, pour his coffee, kiss Holly on the cheek, and talk about market conditions like a man still important enough to have opinions worth hearing. I watched him do it while knowing he had not had a real office in 11 months, and another woman had been holding our grandson while he lied about swim lessons. But the second report was the one that broke a different part of me. Because the second report was about Holly. Darren sent it on a Thursday evening. Wesson was upstairs in the bath. Brock was in the den on another phantom work call. I locked the in-law suite door and sat with the file in my lap for a long moment before I opened it. At first, I needed to believe my daughter had been deceived along with the rest of us. I needed that hope badly. Then I saw the screenshots. Holly had known about the job loss. Not for days, not for a few weeks. For 6 months she had known, not about the woman in Stamford. I am certain that blindsided her completely. But the money was gone, and she had known. The house was failing, and she had known. And together, she and Brock had created a shared document titled simply, Options. I read that document 3 times. Sell the second car. Ask Brock's parents. Delay the mortgage. Then there it was, 3rd item from the bottom. Dad's house, eventual assets. Not ask Dad for help. Not be honest with Dad. Not protect Dad. Just Dad's house, eventual assets. Like I was not her father. Like I was a column in a spreadsheet. Like 40 years of tucking her in and driving her to school and sitting beside her mother's hospital bed had earned me 1 line in a crisis document between delay the mortgage and a question mark next to her aunt's name. That next line hit me in a different place entirely. Ask Aunt Cordy. Aunt Cordy was Marjorie's sister. She lived on disability in Tucson. She still mailed Wesson $5 bills in his birthday cards, because that was genuinely all she could spare. And they had considered reaching for her, too. That night, Holly brought me a bowl of canned chicken soup on a tray because she said I looked pale. Daddy, you okay? And the terrible thing was, some part of her face still looked sincere. That was what made it worse. Not that she had stopped loving me entirely, but that she had learned how to fold love and need together so carefully I could not see the seam between them. I looked at my daughter's face and wondered when I had stopped being her father and become her contingency plan. But I only smiled. Just tired, sweetheart. When she left, I cried harder than I had since the night Marjorie died. The next part began with Thanksgiving. I did not choose Thanksgiving by accident. There are certain truths that do not belong in hallways or quiet arguments. Some truths need a table, witnesses, folded napkins, the kind of silence that falls over a room when everyone realizes the meal was never the point of the invitation. I called Holly and told her I wanted to host this year a private dining room at the Saybrook Hotel. Something special, something that would feel, I told her, like a new beginning for the family. She was confused at first, then excited. The kind of excitement people carry when they smell money nearby but do not want to admit that is what they smell. A private dining room, she asked. I thought your mother would have loved it, I said. That quieted her down immediately. Then I told her I wanted to invite a few extra people. Brock's parents, Aunt Cordy from Tucson, and I would cover her flight, my neighbor Lou, some old friends from Maine, a few people connected to my brother Whit's estate. Maine friends, Holly asked. Whit's people, I said. They have been kind to me since the funeral. She let it go. Brock did not. When Holly mentioned the dinner to him that evening, I watched his eyes sharpen over the rim of his wine glass. A private dining room. Extra guests. Me suddenly paying for flights. Me acting like a man with more resources than anyone had suspected. Then I added the last piece of bait. Casually, between bites of chicken, I mentioned that I had been thinking about my will and that I might share a few thoughts after dinner. Brock set down his fork. Holly reached under the table and squeezed his hand twice. I saw it. I saw everything now. After that, the guest list became my real architecture. I called Marisol, my brother Whit's daughter, a marine biologist working in Maine. I explained the trust and asked her to come and be present. I called Avent Truss, my college roommate of 4 decades, and a retired federal prosecutor. He laughed when I explained what I needed. I wouldn't miss this for the world, he said. He brought Callista Brenaway, a Connecticut attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. And sitting quietly at the far end of the table, punctual and still as a loaded question, was Crowder. Every chair had a purpose. Holly had spent the night before setting the place cards. She had no idea she was decorating the stage where the truth was going to stand up and speak. Thanksgiving Day came in cold and clear with that particular New England light that makes every window look like it is holding a secret. I wore the tie Marjorie had given me for our 30th anniversary. I had kept it folded in tissue paper for 4 years. That morning I took it out, tied it carefully in the mirror, and told her, wherever she was, that I was going to need her strength for this one. We ate first. That mattered. I wanted everyone full and comfortable, and certain the evening was going to be ordinary. Brock had 3 glasses of wine. Holly glowed at the table, smiling at me with the particular warmth of a daughter who believed the announcement she had been waiting for was minutes away. When the plates were cleared, I stood. The room went still. I thanked everyone for coming. I spoke about Marjorie. I spoke about wit. I spoke about family and how real love does not always announce itself. Sometimes it is the hand that shows up. Sometimes it is the person who protects you even after they are gone. Then I said, some of you don't know this yet. My brother Whit passed in September. He left me an inheritance. Holly's smile widened. Brock stopped breathing for half a second. I saw his chest pause. The estate is worth just over $4.1 million. No one moved. Then Crowder stood. For 6 minutes, he explained exactly what had been arranged. The lobster wharf, the compound on Mount Desert Island, the bonds, the shares. Every asset was inside an irrevocable trust, sealed with dual signature requirements, and structured in a way that no power of attorney, no guardianship claim, no argument about an aging man's mental capacity could reach. Not one dime accessible to anyone outside the named beneficiaries. Untouchable. That word settled into the room like a stone dropped into still water. Brock stared at Crowder with the expression of a man doing rapid math in his head and coming up with nothing but zeros. Holly's smile did not disappear slowly. It stopped, like a light switched off. Because what she had just heard was not the announcement she had been managing me toward for 2 months. What she had just heard was the sound of every door she thought she was quietly opening slamming shut at the same time. I took a sip of water. Then I looked at my daughter. Holly, I said, Brock, there's something else. Holly straightened. Dad, maybe this isn't the... It is exactly the time. The table went silent enough that I could hear Wesson in his high chair, quietly working a dinner roll with both hands. I looked at my daughter the way you look at someone you have loved completely and been hurt by deeply, and I said the sentence I had written down in a diner parking lot on a cold Tuesday night and memorized until it was the only thing in my head that felt clean. I heard you. Her face went still. 2 months ago, the Saturday I came to visit, I was standing outside with Wesson's tricycle in my hand, and the kitchen window was cracked open. I gave her back her own words. Every sentence, every plan, every calculation she and Brock had made on the assumption that a lonely old widower with a dead wife's name on his lips would not have the clarity to see what was happening to him. When I finished, the room was so quiet I could hear Aunt Cordy crying softly into her napkin. Brock said, "This is insane." I'm not finished. I opened the folder beside my plate.
Brock, I know you lost your job 11 months ago. I know about the WeWork on Park Avenue. I know about the online poker. I know the $612,000. I know the Range Rover is behind. I know the house is in pre-foreclosure. And I know about Stamford.
His mother made a sound I will not try to describe. Holly turned her head. Not toward me. Toward him. What does Stamford mean? She asked. Brock said nothing. So I told her. I told her there was a woman, that she had met Wesson, that she had held him. Holly whispered, "What?" And in the silence that followed, Brock had nowhere left to go. Holly looked at her husband with the particular expression of a woman who had just realized she had been managing a man she did not actually know. "Did she hold my son?" Holly asked. He reached for his wineglass. The silence answered before he could. Holly's hand went to her mouth, not dramatically, quietly. The way someone moves when something breaks inside rather than outside, and somehow that small, contained movement hurt me more than any scene ever could have. Because I could see in her face that this specific part, was real shock. She had known about the money. She had known about the job. She had even helped draft the document that treated her father like a balance sheet. But she had not known this woman had been at a playground holding her child. Brock stood. "Holly, we're leaving." Before she could respond, Callista Brennaway leaned forward from the center of the table with the calm, unhurried manner of someone who had sat across from frightened people in difficult rooms many times before. She slid a business card across the white linen. "Whenever you're ready," Callista said. "No pressure." Brock stared at the card as if it had teeth. "Don't touch that," he said. That was the moment everyone at the table saw what he actually was. Not the confident husband, not the hedge fund man with the expensive watch and the strong handshake. Just a frightened man who had been running out of options for 11 months and had finally run out of room. Holly looked at the card. Then she looked at Brock. Then at Wesson, who was still working his dinner roll with the patient concentration of someone who had no idea the people he trusted most were falling apart around him. Brock lowered his voice. "Get up." Holly picked up the business card, opened her purse, placed it carefully inside. Then she looked at her husband and said, "Find your own ride home." No one cheered. No one clapped. But in that silent dining room, it felt like a window had opened in a room that had been closed too long. After Brock walked out, I looked at my daughter. Not at the woman who had written Dad's house in a crisis document. Not at the wife who had helped a failing man plan around a grieving father's loneliness. I looked at the little girl who used to run into my arms during thunderstorms. And I said the hardest sentence I have ever said to someone I love. "Holly, I love you. I have loved you every single day since the moment you were born. But I am not moving in with you. I am not selling my house because you are afraid. I am not signing a power of attorney. And I am never going to pretend I did not hear what I heard through that window." She started to speak. I raised my hand gently. "Let me finish." She went quiet. "I will always be your father. I will always be Wesson's grandfather. But I will not be your rescue plan. I will not be your safety net after you lie to me. And I will not let anyone use your mother's memory as a way to make me stop thinking clearly." That one landed hard. I watched it land. Good. Some truths need to hurt before they can heal. "I'm going to Maine," I said. "The compound has a porch and a study and more quiet than I probably deserve. That is where I am going to live." Holly wiped her face with the edge of her napkin. "If you want a real relationship with me, there is a path back. It starts with a Sunday phone call where you don't ask me for anything. No money, no favors, no paperwork, just the truth." She nodded. "And if you can't do that," I said, "I will still love you. But I will love you from Maine." 6 months have passed since that dinner. I am writing this from the porch of the compound on Mount Desert Island. There is a wool blanket over my knees, and the Atlantic is gray and restless beyond the tree line. 2 lobster boats are moving past the point this morning, slow and steady, the way working people move when they do not need anyone watching them to know they matter. The wharf still runs the way it did when Whit was alive. It does not make anyone rich, but it keeps 12 families fed through the winter. That feels like the right kind of thing to leave behind. Brock filed no contest on the divorce when the legal bills started arriving. His credit cards were declined one by one. The Range Rover went back. The Greenwich house went into foreclosure. The woman from Stamford disappeared from his life the moment she understood that the watch and the car and the confident handshake had all been borrowed from a future he never actually owned. Last I heard, he was sleeping in his parents' guest room. He tells people he was betrayed by a greedy family. That part almost made me laugh. Almost. Holly and Wesson came to Maine in May. Not because I invited them to move in, not because I forgave everything in one clean cinematic moment. Real life does not work that way, and I am too old to pretend otherwise. She came because she had nowhere honest left to stand. And for the first time, she did not ask me for money. She asked if she and Wesson could stay for a little while she worked on becoming someone her son could trust. That was the Sunday phone call I had described. No request for a check, no mention of the trust, no soft voice wrapped around my grief. Just my daughter, honest and ashamed, asking if there was still a door open somewhere. There was. A small one. Holly works at a bookstore in Bar Harbor now. She goes to a Thursday evening meeting, which told me there were things she had been carrying that I had not seen clearly while I was busy seeing only the betrayal. She is quieter these days. Less polished. More honest. She looks me in the eye when she says good morning, and she does not look away. We have not talked deeply about the kitchen window yet. Callista says we will when we are ready. We are not ready. But we will be. Wesson is on the porch beside me right now, drawing a lobster boat with a broken orange crayon. It looks more like a shoe. I told him it was the finest lobster boat I had ever seen. He accepted that completely and went back to his work. He calls me Pop. He has no idea how close the people who loved him came to destroying each other. And if I have anything to say about it, he never will. I still think about that Saturday afternoon. The tricycle on the lawn. The envelope in my jacket pocket. The kitchen window cracked open just wide enough for the truth to reach me before I walked through the door. If I had arrived 2 minutes earlier, I would have heard nothing. I would have hugged my daughter, trusted her smile, moved into that in-law suite, signed whatever papers they eventually put in front of me, and called it love. That is the part that still keeps me awake. Not what Holly did. What I almost allowed because I wanted so badly to believe she was still the little girl who fell asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. My brother Whit used to say, "Let people show you who they are, then believe them, then act accordingly." I thought I understood that when I was young. I did not. Understanding wisdom and living it are two separate countries. Most of us do not cross the border until someone we love pushes us there without meaning to. Here is what I have learned from this porch in Maine. Every choice plants something. Brock chose lies, secret debts, a parallel life, and a borrowed identity. What grew from that was foreclosure, divorce, and a guest room in his parents' house. Holly chose fear and silence and a document that turned her father into a line item. What grew from that was shame, a broken marriage, and the long, hard road back toward honesty. And I chose not to explode. I chose to listen. To wait. To protect myself before I tried to punish anyone. What grew from that is this porch. This gray water. This grandson drawing lobster boats with a broken crayon. and a daughter who now says good morning while looking me in the eye. So take this from an old man who learned it late. Do not confuse being loved with being needed. Do not confuse being needed with being used. People who love you do not itemize you. They do not turn your grief into leverage. And when the truth comes to you through a cracked window, do not run from it. Go quiet, think clearly, then act when you can act well. Because sometimes the cruelest part of a betrayal is not losing your money. It is realizing how close you came to calling the trap love. If this story stayed with you, I want to hear from you in the comments. Would you have walked through that door? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have confronted them that same afternoon? Tell me below. And if you believe that patience, truth, and quiet strength can deliver more justice than anger ever could, subscribe to Eamon's Revenge Stories. There are more stories coming, and every one of them ends where it should.